Hello, everyone, and welcome into First and North. I'm Cassie Carlson. Joining me this week on First and North, we have Jennifer Hammond from Fox Detroit, Tim Van Vooren from Fox Milwaukee, and Pierre Nugent from Fox Minneapolis. And Pierre, I want to start with you because what is going on with the Vikings? They fired GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah late last week after he spent the entire week in Mobile at the Senior Bowl scouting for the draft. What's been the reaction in Minneapolis?
Certainly raised my eyebrows, Cassie. There's no question about it. I know everybody wants to talk about the timing of which the firing took place, but really, it wasn't really so much of a surprise for me in terms of him being fired on January 30th, as opposed to perhaps January 15th. The surprise to me is parting ways with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah less than a year after you sign him to a contract extension. Less than a year. All of a sudden now Minnesota's ownership group took a step back and thought to themselves, this is no longer working. This is not the direction we want to go to. So that really was the most surprising aspect of it for me. Firing him less than a year. You just gave him a contract extension. But yeah, no matter how you slice it, this was something that was completely out of left field for Vikings fans, and the timing of the situation to let Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah go, certainly a move that raised a lot of eyebrows here in the Twin Cities.
All right, here's what Vikings Mark Wilf had to say about the decision to move on from him.
This is a critical offseason. Ultimately, we felt the change was necessary in football operations and did not feel comfortable going forward into this offseason with the current leadership. It's not about any one decision or move. We looked at the situation cumulatively. We just didn't feel confident going through the entirety of the offseason, an additional draft, and free agency with this structure.
All right, so Wilf said that they looked at everything cumulatively. They didn't sign Sam Darnold, who won 14 games for the Vikings last year. He goes on to Seattle, wins 14 games, and takes them to the Super Bowl this year. There's questions about J.J. McCarthy being the answer at QB. Only 4 of his 28 draft picks are starters. And now they don't plan on hiring a GM until after the draft. Pierre, do you think the timeline changes the attraction of this job?
Yeah, I certainly think it does, and the fact that they're not going to be hiring a general manager until after the draft suddenly makes me wonder how much power Kevin O'Connell really swings in that organization, because if you're not going to bring in a new general manager before the draft, Rob Brzezinski, who will be the interim GM for the time being, and Kevin O'Connell will collaborate as the Vikings prepare for the 2026 NFL draft. But yeah, this is certainly a bit confusing as well, because it's not really the power structure that you normally see in most organizations in the NFL. A lot of times you'll see if a team wants to wipe the slate clean, they'll bring in a GM, and that GM gets to pick his head coach. But the Vikings are sticking with Kevin O'Connell, who is widely regarded as one of the young, bright minds in the NFL. We certainly want to give him credit there. But for the Vikings to now wait until after the NFL draft to bring in a general manager, certainly not the way I would approach it. But at the same time, too, Minnesota, you heard Mark Wilf talk about it there, about it being a critical offseason for the Vikings. But really, when you look at this situation for the Vikings, the draft track record, like you pointed out, Cassie, for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah over the previous 4 seasons, I think that was really the main crux. I know the optics of Sam Darnold playing in the Super Bowl this Sunday looks bad for Minnesota, that they chose J.J. McCarthy essentially over Sam Darnold. I can't fault the logic, however, because playing and constructing a team with a good rookie quarterback and allowing you to spend money elsewhere on the roster, that's not a philosophy that I can disagree with. They just missed on the quarterback. Both of these things can be true at the same time. You miss on the quarterback, you miss on your draft picks over the last 4 years. A lot of those situations have come to a head, and now the Vikings are moving on.
Yeah, the way it sounded, Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores were already heavily involved in personnel decisions because of Adolfo-Mensah and kind of his role with kind of evaluating talent in general. I want to switch gears to the Bears because they're dealing with their own changes, this time to the coaching staff, which is new territory in Chicago that teams are plucking from a coaching staff, as Declan Doyle, their offensive coordinator, was named the Ravens OC. So he is now going to be paired with Lamar Jackson, a 2-time MVP who is 29 years old. Doyle himself is 29 years old, one of those young up-and-comers in the NFL. He got his start with the Saints under Sean Payton, now gets a season under Ben Johnson Johnson. And I feel like this is the Ben Johnson coaching tree that's starting to get roots and expand. And I think it's going to be a continual progress that we see him become one of those guys like Sean McVay, like Kyle Shanahan, just because of the offensive mind that he has and what we saw of the Bears having one of the top offenses in the league this year. And so Declan Doyle now is going to be tasked being paired with Lamar Jackson to get the most out of him after a down season. And I think the run game in particular and what he was able to learn from Ben Johnson made him one of the good candidates for this, knowing that the Ravens have a strong run game in Derrick Henry. But now the Bears are going to have to fill that void. And I think when you look at Ben Johnson and his OC position and what he's looking at in that room and with that coach in general is probably going to be a young up-and-comer, because that person is not going to call plays under Ben Johnson. And they're known to be a workhorse in the room. I'll never forget Ben Johnson saying at his opening press conference that he likes grinders, guys who are going to be in the building late. And the reality is Declan Doyle did a lot of organizing for Ben Johnson to get things ready for practice, to get things ready for Sundays. And the newcomer, whoever fills that position, is going to have to do the same. And that's why I think they're going to go young. And we just saw a report that they are set to interview Connor Sanger for their OC opening. He is a Milwaukee native, went to high school at Pius. 30-year-old that played at Wisconsin in UW Oshkosh before going into coaching at Oshkosh. Currently, the Cardinals' pass game specialist and worked under defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon in Arizona. Just another young up-and-comer. Obviously, people are going to want to be under the Ben Johnson tree. And Tim, I know you said he played baseball and football in Milwaukee growing up, and he was decent at both or good at both? What? Give us a scouting report.
Yeah, so super high school athlete. Could have gone somewhere in baseball, went somewhere in football, obviously. Not a real big guy, so that's why he didn't probably play more at Wisconsin. But in the coaching world, he has stepped up, if you look at his resume, almost every year, either from one school to the next, or once he got to the NFL, moving up position by position. Super young guy, very bright, very hard worker. So he would answer at least one of the requirements you're putting out there, Cassie.
Well, the other change that the Bears are going through is that they lose assistant general manager Ian Cunningham, who takes over in Atlanta. There is some drama because of the Rooney Rule and the way things are worded in it. The Bears are not going to get those 2 third-round compensatory picks because Matt Ryan is considered the primary decision maker as the president of football. Tim, GM Brian Gutekunst, he is staying put in Green Bay. The Packers announced his extension, as well as Executive VP and Director of Football Operations Russ Ball. This comes less than 2 weeks after signing Matt LaFleur to his extension. I mean, the Packers seem to always have continuity, and how does that play into their success year after year to get into the postseason?
That's definitely what they're looking to here. They do truly believe Matt LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball all work together very well. It's a very much a consensus type organization. So that's one of Ed Policy, the president's real qualifications that he's looking for in his decision-making group. And they feel these are the best guys out there, that there wasn't somebody else in the hiring cycle that they had to go get as a general manager or as a head coach for Matt LaFleur or for Russ Ball, who really manages that cap. So the Packers do like continuity. You're exactly right about that, Cassie. They believe in these guys providing it. Brian Gutekunst went out, swung for the fences, got Micah Parsons in a trade. Most people in the league would say that trade itself was a win for the Packers before Micah Parsons obviously got hurt as the season went along. The drafting of Jordan Love while you still had Aaron Rodgers on your roster, a win for the Packers. So you look at some of those things and you kind of thought all along Brian Gutekunst was going to be set. Russ Ball, I didn't think there was any question there. The Matt LaFleur situation obviously was resolved very quickly after the season. The Packers believe, hey, run it back with these guys and they'll succeed.
All right, Jennifer. Lions hired former Arizona offensive coordinator Drew Petzing as their new OC. He was actually in Ben Johnson's wedding. I love that Ben Johnson dropped that random fact in the middle of the season. And his quarterback, Jared Goff, called him a home run hire. Do you think that'll be the case given his track record and maybe even the connection between him and Ben Johnson?
I think there's a couple things here at play, and I just want to kind of tag team on what Tim was just saying about the continuity in Green Bay. They've had, 3 quarterbacks in however many years?
I think
that's where the most important We're all jealous. That's, I think, where the most important continuity happens in Green Bay and has been the secret to their success. But for the Detroit Lions with Jared Goff, I mean, they've got a guy that Dan Campbell absolutely adores, respects, and trusts implicitly with the offense and a lot of decisions that go into it. So it's no surprise that Jared Goff was sitting in the meetings when they brought in Drew Petzing, and they interviewed him, and those two talked, and it was really a great conversation by all accounts, because the thing that Jared Goff loves is a creative mind, and that is what the word is on with Petzing, is that he's going to be a young creative mind that's going to be innovative, and the whole thing is that he's going to be cerebral, and he's going to find ways to get all of these offensive pieces involved in the plays and getting them some yards, getting them catches, getting them touchdowns, being creative. They want to keep that thing going. Maybe it's not as much Dan Campbell's offense anymore as it's going to be Drew Petzing's, and that's going to be critical for Detroit, because Dan Campbell needs to get back to doing what he does so well, and we said that all season long. Once he took over the play calling, he was spread a little too thin, and when he also brought in Kafka to help assist in a high offensive role, they're going to have a lot of different guys in here, cooks in the kitchen, coming together to create an offense like we saw under Ben Johnson. And if Jared Goff likes the guy, I say all the more power, because he's a guy who knows exactly what this offense needs to operate successfully.
Yeah, Tim, I want to go back to you, because Jonathan Gannon gets fired from Arizona, but picked up by Matt LaFleur to replace Jeff Hafley. And we know that sometimes, especially we know this in Chicago, that sometimes a coach is a better coordinator than a head coach. So what did LaFleur have to say about Gannon just coaching the defense?
Yeah, LaFleur has not spoken directly to us since the end of the season, but he is quoted in the statement announcing Jonathan Gannon coming aboard, very confident that Jonathan Gannon can do this job. He liked Jeff Hafley, having had coaching experience at the college level the last time he hired a defensive coordinator. Obviously, Gannon has done it at the NFL level, and is so far, if you've watched the kind of pieces fall into place afterwards, Gannon's been able to assemble a real top-notch and experienced defensive staff. I think LaFleur was looking for some of that as well in his coordinator hire. Who can he bring with him? The Packers think they're close. We talked about the continuity a moment ago, and they think with their defensive talent, the right coaching staff can get them over the hump. And let's face it, those coaches, those assistant coaches and position coaches, and Jonathan Gannon probably all feel they could really burnish their resume if that happens quickly in Green Bay this season, or maybe the season after.
Yeah, I'll never forget Ben Johnson calling the Packers the best defense they'll probably see all season, especially early on in December. The NFL world shaken when it was reported last week that Bill Belichick was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now it comes out today Robert Kraft was not voted in this year. So listen to what Jimmy Johnson and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell had to say about Belichick and Kraft.
Well, first of all, I think this tarnishes everything in the Hall of Fame. All of the inductees, everybody in the Hall of Fame, just because of 10 or 11 or 12 ignorant, jealous who did not vote for him.
We are not involved in it. Listen, Bill Belichick's record goes without saying. Same with the Patriots and Robert Kraft, who's also a candidate. They're spectacular. They've contributed so much to this game, and I believe they'll be Hall of Famers.
Pierre, is this now where you feel like the Hall of Fame has to change their voting process, as these two are obvious, some of the most elite that will ever play or be in the game?
I don't think anything necessarily needs to be changed, if we're being perfectly honest. I certainly understand why people are up in arms about why two of the most notable faces in the NFL over the past 2 decades were not voted in the Hall of Fame. But I have to interject here and kind of voice my support in some sense that were these not the two same individuals, being Belichick and Kraft, who oversaw a couple of cheating scandals in the NFL? Does that not count for something? Mm-hmm. That has to count for something, does it not? I'm not saying that they should not be in the Hall of Fame. I think they both should be in the Hall of Fame. But that has to count for something. And it has to mean something, because those were two of the biggest stories and biggest scandals in the National Football League at that time. So why should I believe that all of these wins are legitimate? Why should I believe it? That's just where I'm coming from.
Jennifer, you're nodding your head in agreement. Do you agree?
I do agree, because there are obviously a lot of things that go into the Hall of Fame voting, and we've seen a lot of very talented players, coaches, GMs over the years not get into various Hall of Fames in other sports, baseball among them, the most notable being Pete Rose and the cheating scandal. So I think it's a very valid point that Pierre brings up about Deflategate and all of the other things that people may question them for. Also, sometimes character comes into play, and if people have a personal axe to grind, maybe they're going to wield that power. I don't necessarily think that that's the way to go about it, because we know ultimately they are deserving of being in the Hall of Fame, and both men will be in there. But it's an interesting message that you need to make sure that you handle things properly, all because there are some others that are overseers that can impact your future and your path.
Tim, do you think that means Tom Brady might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer in 2028 when he's eligible?
I don't think that's true, Cassie. I think he makes it. You know, I don't think I've ever been in a conversation where I found myself defending Bill Belichick or Robert Kraft. I'm not sure I ever will be again. But the wins and the championships are still on their resumes. If the cheating scandal was going to take those wins away, yes, I would see it that way. I think that because of the resumes being what they are, those two should have been in the Hall of Fame. I'm not sure that you change the voting, whatever it is. I'm not going to go as far as Jimmy Johnson about calling names on the people who voted a certain way, but I think it's a mistake that those two guys, particularly Belichick, not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think Tom Brady, whether the voting gets changed or whatever else, he's a landslide first ballot Hall of Famer, and I don't think there'll be any question about it.
All right, we need to take a time out. The NFL will be playing 9 international games. We'll tell you where. And did Justin Jefferson wish Sam Darnold was his quarterback this season? We hear from the All-Pro wide receiver when we come back on First and North. Welcome back to First and North. I'm Cassie Carlson at our Fox 32 studios in Chicago, joined by Jennifer Hammond in Detroit, Tim Van Voren in Milwaukee, and Pierre Nugent in Minneapolis. Tim, the Packers are in the market for a new quarterbacks coach after Sean Mannion is poached by the Eagles, where he'll call plays as their new OC. Hearing anything about who they're targeting or what would make a good fit with Jordan Love?
Well, they are interested in Connor Sanger. Obviously, he's getting a lot of interest elsewhere in the NFL as well, and maybe even for higher positions. So who knows if that can come together. They certainly have cast a wide net out there, and I think it's an attractive job for somebody to work with Jordan Love, who's very receptive to coaching, too. You talk about these players and what kind of fit it's going to be from the coaching standpoint. I think you have to look at the players as well. Jordan Love's been very receptive to coaching. Obviously, Matt LaFleur knows how to work with quarterbacks extremely well in Green Bay. So they're confident they can get the right fit in there. Sean Mannion is a bright light in the coaching tree for sure. Only 33 years old. Good luck handling the criticism that may come with some results in Philadelphia, but otherwise he's a guy we'll hear from again, certainly.
Yeah, I think that's why Declan Doyle withdrew his name. He didn't want to be, the 6th offensive coordinator in Philly by the end of next season. Pierre, Sam Darnold in the Super Bowl, as we mentioned in the last block, and all of Minneapolis knows. Vikings fans are obviously thinking, what if we kept this guy? Well, Vikings All-Pro wide receiver Justin Jefferson weighed in on it as well. Take a listen.
It's definitely tough. It's tough to watch. Of course, I love that he's in the Super Bowl. I'm happy for him. I want nothing but the best for him, especially the way his journey was at first. And, people doubting him and people not giving him the respect. Everyone knows the difficulty of the quarterback position this year, of how we was dealt it. But, of course, having a quarterback that's already had the season under his belt with us, knew the plays, knew the playbook, knew the players, of course, throwing to me, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, all of these guys. I definitely felt like we would have done better.
Pierre, how do you feel like the Vikings would have finished if they had Sam Darnold and all those weapons?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, especially when you consider that the tumultuous season they had at the quarterback position, they still were able to win 9 games. So if Sam Darnold was the starter again in Minnesota, you have to imagine that Minnesota would have been good enough to be a playoff representative in the NFC. Now, as far as what Justin Jefferson just said, I don't disagree with anything Justin Jefferson just said. I think everything he just said was pretty accurate. But if I'm J.J. McCarthy and I'm listening to that, I'm thinking to myself, what the heck, dude? It's not like I want to be hurt on purpose. It's not like I'm trying to be bad on purpose. I'm trying to get to where I need to get to in order to elevate this franchise. So I was just a little bit surprised that Justin Jefferson would go public with those comments, but at the same time, I don't disagree with anything he said.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, as the year went on, obviously we could all see his frustration on the sidelines too, which you couldn't catch just from the broadcast cameras. Jennifer, the St. Browns had Fred Warner on their podcast last week, and just like the Lions, the 49ers have dealt with their fair share of injuries. But when it comes to the Lions, he says the way they practice plays a bigger role. Listen to this.
The Lions have hella injuries every year, too. I'm like, fuck.
Y'all go hard. Old Dan Campbell be over there telling y'all to bite kneecaps. So at some point, you going,
Wait, so do you guys go full tackle in camp?
No, we would never do that.
See, we going live.
See, and at some point, Dan, Dan gonna come to his senses, man, and be like, "Listen, this ain't making nobody better, brother. All right, we can still get our work in without bringing guys to the ground."
Have you ever considered that, Jennifer?
I think that they're biting their own kneecaps maybe and spiting their face or something like that. I don't even know what that saying would become to include the kneecaps. But I do think that the fact that the Lions have been practicing really hard over the last 5 years since Dan Campbell has been here has really kind of changed the way they might look at things. And Campbell has said in the offseason that there is nothing that they won't look at and evaluate. They finished this season with the second highest number of man games lost to injury. And that speaks volumes to part of their issue. They also did have huge problems with just personnel along the offensive line. Part of that was injuries. Part of that was also defections. When they've got guys that are aging, they've also, lost Frank Ragnow. So once they get the players back in there and they've got a little bit of a fortified offensive line, and I think that they try to look at some of the things that they are doing during the offseason. Dan Campbell is a guy who knows when to admit that he's, maybe made a mistake. And perhaps that is something that they will look at. If their players are saying it, it makes you think that they've got to do some listening, because they don't play in the preseason at all. So they have to go hard to a certain extent during training camp. They always have the joint practices, and those have been very physical. But I don't know that you need to go full tackle and full contact every single day in training camp and every single day of practice.
Well, I think that's one thing that Ben Johnson actually took from Dan Campbell, because we witnessed one of the toughest and most intense Bears training camps in a long time. And I think even Ben Johnson said it in his postseason press conference. He said, the feedback I got from a lot of the players was that that was the toughest training camp they ever went through. And he said, I didn't think that was tough at all. But I think Ben Johnson was in a little bit of a different position, because he knew he had to come in here and change the culture. And there were times back in the Eberflus era where players were like, we don't want to do that. And so they would tell Eberflus that, and they wouldn't do it. So they had a lot of influence in it. And I think Ben Johnson just wanted to set the tone early, being like, hey, I'm the head man in charge. We're going to be we're going to be a physical team. And so I remember the dog days of training camp when they had the pads on and they were supposed to have one live period, and they ended up having an entire live practice. Players were kind of taken aback, and I think it earned him a lot of respect from the locker room, which was needed in his first year. Whether or not that continues moving on, I think will be interesting to see. And the Bears did deal with a handful of injuries, especially soft tissue injuries, which is always something teams look at in the offseason. Are you guys ready to go international? Because 9 international games this year. Let's see, what are some of them? You're going to go to Paris for the first time. The Saints are going to be the home team. Dublin, Madrid, Mexico City, Munich, Melbourne, and then 3 games in London. Pierre, if you had to take your pick, where would you pack your bags and go to?
Oh, man, that's such a tough one. I've been to Mexico City before, and Madrid, 2 beautiful cities. My pick would be Madrid. I would love to go back to Madrid, get another look at it. It's been a long time since I've been back to Madrid. I would take Madrid. I'd have to take my brother-in-law, who is from Madrid. He would have to come with me. I'd have to pay for his ticket, of course, too. So I'm going for Madrid.
Worth it. Tim, you got a pick?
The last time the Packers were supposed to play at the Saints, they had hurricane damage. The game was moved to Jacksonville. This year they're supposed to play at the Saints. That game's in Paris, or it could be at least. Something. Quit jobbing us out of trips to New Orleans. Come on. I guess I'd take Melbourne. That'd be my pick on there, Cassie. That's a pretty good map you guys had drawn out there, too. That's pretty cool.
I know. Shout out Roger. That's our producer. Jennifer, where would you like to go?
The only reason I'm going to say Rio is because I think that is where the Lions are destined to go. There's been a lot of stories floating around that the Lions may end up in Rio. And to begin the season, I don't think that's such a bad trip as far as travel time. I also think it would be a lovely destination, and the people there are wonderful, and I've never been.
I think the Bears are going to head to Madrid. They are one of 3 teams that hold marketing rights over there. And so, Pierre, if you want to come along, Bears, Madrid, you're more than welcome. You have to pay your own way.
I'm practicing my Spanish. I'm practicing my Spanish as we speak. Well, I'm ready to go.
Muy
Let's
bueno.
make it happen.
Muy bueno.
Sí. All right, we need to take our final timeout. We preview Super Bowl 60 and give you our picks when we return on First and North. Welcome back to First and North. Super Bowl festivities are underway in the Bay Area as the Seahawks and Patriots get set for Sunday night. Let's get your picks. And Jennifer, I'll start with you. Who's your Super Bowl pick?
You know, I think I'm going to have to go with the Seahawks. I've got a little bit of Patriot fatigue, if you will. I know it's a whole new regime there. I love Mike Vrabel. I actually wanted him to get an interview or get the job here in Detroit when they went the Matt Patricia way back in the day. But I really feel like I've got to go with the NFC. I absolutely love the Seahawks. And I think it's a great story for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Tim, who are you going with?
You know, John Schneider and Elliott Wolf, the two general managers, went to the same high school in Green Bay. You're going to have to respect the elders on this one, John Schneider and the Seahawks convincingly.
Pierre?
I don't know if I'm as convinced as Tim is, but I will go with Seattle as well. 24-20, 24-17, somewhere in that area. I know that's a big, significant difference if you're looking at a point spread, which is currently 4.5. But I am going to go with Seattle as well. Why not? 24-20 Seattle. I'll put it in the book.
I'm going Seattle as well, and I love the Sam Darnold redemption story. All right, everyone. Great show as always. For Jennifer Hammond, Tim Van Born, and Pierre Nugent, I'm Cassie Carlson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week right here on First and North.